The promised kickoff takes us to the east and down below there, to the south. A country that might be very distant from all the others, a feature that helped to protect it for centuries, which nonetheless may not be relevant anymore. I'm talking about Australia, the country that has experienced one of the worst cyber attacks this year. Well, as all the things cyber know no borders, we are now much closer than we ever thought we could be. Something Abigail Bradshaw, head of the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, certainly realises fully well, as she has worked within the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet as head of the National Security Division. Abigail, what threats and challenges can a nation experience or a nation-state experience in the digital era?
Well, g'day from Australia. My name's Abigail Bradshaw. I head the Australian Cybersecurity Centre. My centre provides whole-of-economy cybersecurity assistance and advice to Australian governments, critical infrastructure providers, businesses, families and individuals, leading our efforts to lift national cyber resilience. Thank you, colleagues at CYBERSEC, for hosting this most excellent conference and for inviting me. CYBERSEC is an outstanding institution making an important global contribution to cybersecurity, even in this really difficult year. And I'm so pleased to be part of the conference for the first time. I hope if I'm lucky enough to be invited next year, I might actually meet some of you in person. I've been reflecting lately on my role within the Cybersecurity Centre and my professional interest in managing crises, and on how many lessons we've learned from COVID. Many of those lessons are applicable to the digital environment. To hope for the best and plan for the worst, that preventing and containing damage and elimination of the threat requires collective action, collective raising of defences, and that everyone has a role to play in that effort. It requires global collaboration with individuals, academia, industry and government. Finally, we've learned that the internet is a good thing. It enables our lives, learning, earning and relationships and economy to go on. It's a facilitator of our prosperity, security and cohesion through crisis. More importantly, that beyond the crisis, technology and our ability to embrace the digital world will be central to the economic recovery. Since the pandemic onset more than 6 months ago, my centre has observed a sharp rise in email phishing, message scams and ransomware attacks, capitalising on the uncertainty that's come in lockstep with COVID-19. Between July last year and the end of June this year, our Report Cyber online reporting tool received almost 60,000 cybercrime reports from individuals and businesses across Australia, or roughly 1 report every 10 minutes. For the most part, the methods have not been new. Malware or ransomware hiding within legitimate applications or masquerading as messages from the organisations we trust most: hospitals, governments, charities and banks. Yet while governments and organisations globally have focused on health and humanitarian responses or the economic consequences of the virus, cybercriminals and adversaries have been seeking new pathways to profit from this crisis. More surprising has been their tenacity and increasingly sophisticated ability to springboard off new government policy announcements and world developments, and then quickly refashion and renew their attacks. The bad news is there's no sign of slowing. Cyber attacks, much like the COVID-19 virus, travels in waves, aided by the proliferation of low-cost malware and ransomware tools through the dark corners of the internet. Helping their spread, most of the innovations that have changed the global economy over the last few decades rely on network connectivity in commerce, communication, education and training, supply chains and much more. At one end of the threat scale are the opportunistic cyber criminals and online scammers who target vulnerable Australians in homes and businesses for profit. At the other end are the sophisticated, determined and well-resourced state-based actors. These actors tend to be sophisticated, well-resourced and patient adversaries whose actions could impact on our national security and economic prosperity. We know many of you have seen similar trends in your own countries to some degree, with adversaries zeroing in on a multitude of sectors, governments at all levels, industry, business, education, health, service providers, and critical infrastructure operators. Whatever the target of choice, what is abundantly clear is that the protective cyber defence mission is now of critical importance and warrants a global shift to put cybersecurity as a front-of-mind issue for everyone. The push to improve cybersecurity and resilience should and must be a global effort. Our challenge is that we're coming at the problem after the horses bolted. The internet was not built with security in mind. It's no one's fault, it's just the way it is. But the limitations and risks require quick action. It's why so many of my global counterpart agencies are tasked with the common mission of making the internet safer for people to use, using our technical capabilities and cooperation with global industry and government partners to remove the harm before it emerges. When I hear from colleagues around the globe, it's clear that the volume and scale of threat can only be met by scale and speed in response. That is a focus and deliberate shift in mindset within the Australian Cybersecurity Centre. Our response must be active and, where possible, an automated cyber defence, and it must also be cyber defence at scale. And here's some examples. Blocking malicious websites. We regularly block malicious websites with the assistance of telecommunications companies. We literally went about blocking hundreds of them during COVID-19, but it is a relentless task with reducing returns and better achieved further upstream by having businesses reduce the number of threats by automatically blocking malicious content. This solution protects businesses at speed and scale. We must globally support businesses to implement threat blocking technology that can automatically protect citizens and businesses. Companies like Australian telecommunication provider Telstra are actively engaged in this activity. In May, Telstra announced an upscale to its domain name filtering to automatically block millions of malware communications. And there are effective mechanisms for blocking SMS phishing texts at scale. Telstra currently blocks more than 500,000 scam calls per month from reaching customers. The ACSC has participated in a pilot program to trial joint technical solutions to block malicious text messages from reaching customers. An SMS that is sent from a sender ID that does not originate from valid infrastructure is blocked from transiting the telecommunications networks. This has protected the COVID-19 economic welfare and stimulus package distributed by the Australian Government to Australian people from malicious cyber criminals. Finally, in appropriate, lawful and proportionate way, in Australia, we'll continue to make use of our offensive cyber powers to disable malicious infrastructure offshore to disrupt criminal franchises at scale. It's clear that global collaboration will enable the amplification of these effects in a way individual efforts could never achieve. On that note, we should celebrate Europol's public-private collaboration, No More Ransomware, which helps victims of ransomware retrieve their encrypted data without having to pay criminals and has assisted more than 200,000 people. This initiative showcases the value of public-private cooperations with over 150 supporting partners in law enforcement, the private sector and academia. One of the most significant challenges for Australia in cybersecurity sits with the private sector, and in particular those who own and operate critical infrastructure and systems of national significance. Cyber vulnerabilities in critical infrastructure are, if left untreated, serious national level risks to society. We are conscious of sophisticated actors continuing to target governments and critical infrastructure providers. About 35% of reported cyber incidents over the last financial year in Australia impacted critical infrastructure providers that deliver essential services including healthcare, education, banking, water, communications, transport and energy. A successful cyber attack against any of these services could have significant ramifications for the broader economy and way of life. This is occurring globally, and we're aware that during COVID-19, malicious actors have taken advantage of our vulnerable status to continue to target critical infrastructure. The consequences could be catastrophic, causing shortages or destruction to medical supplies, instability in supply of food or grocery, impacts to water supply and sanitation, impacts to telecommunications, and inability for businesses and governments to function. At its most extreme, a catastrophic disruption could cause loss of life. In Australia, the government's role in addressing this threat is three-part. First, to drive an uplift in resilience across sectors through regulation, to clarify roles, responsibilities and expectations between industry and government, and using our unique capabilities to address cyber threats. A new framework is being developed for implementation, which will apply to an expanded set of critical infrastructure providers. It will include a positive security obligation for critical infrastructure systems, implemented through sector-specific standards proportionate to risk. An enhanced cybersecurity obligation which established the ability for government to request information to contribute to the development of a real-time national threat picture. An owner and operator obligations to participate in preparatory activities and exercises, and government assistance for entities that are the target of a cyber attack by establishing government authorities to disrupt and respond to threats in an emergency. The proper development and operation of this framework relies on enhanced government-industry partnership, improved coordination across government and briefing to entities, and co-designing best practice guidance with critical infrastructure entities, government partners and regulators and international partners. And finally, to the Internet of Things, it's on all of our minds. The numbers are eye-gouging. By 2030, we estimate more than 21 billion IoT devices connected to the internet globally, with highest estimates predicting over 64 billion devices. Beyond personal devices, these include health and industrial devices that can drive safety, health and business efficiencies. To support businesses in taking action to protect themselves and their customers, the Australian Government has released a voluntary code of practice, securing the Internet of Things for consumers, to inform businesses about the cybersecurity features expected of the internet-connected devices available in Australia. My centre has released practical guidance on how to interpret the code, both from the perspective of the consumer and the manufacturer. These are early days in some of our newest efforts to continue to enhance our cyber resilience, but the cost of sitting by and not making bold and steady progress is too high for any of us to bear. I look forward to sharing with you on this joint journey, and I'm optimistic that our joint focus will achieve a safer and secure, not adversarial internet. Internationally, we're at the cusp of a global trend towards companies and countries working together to ensure the next wave of technologies that will reshape our societies will do so in a positive way. Australia is committed to supporting and sustaining international mechanisms that promote stability and to working with partners on a voluntary basis to deter and respond to unacceptable behaviour in cyberspace. I'm convinced a more resilient cybersecurity landscape is before us. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to crossing paths with you, hopefully in person next time.
This has been highly informative and has explained much, hasn't it? Thank you very much for every word of it, Abigail.